Welcome to Mind of a Champion, a three-part series that is going to take a look at just how you turn a group of athletes into Olympic gold medal winning superstars. The sacrifice, the success, of course, and then the significance. And we'll be hearing from some of these superstars. Even a team manager weighs in. But in order to hopefully crack the code behind how you actually achieve this, we are joined probably by the two most qualified people, two gold medal winning coaches, the two who guided the Fiji men's team and the Australian women's team to Olympic gold in 2016 at the Rio Olympic Games. In this first episode, Ben Ryan and Tim Walsh will be revealing how both of them had some reservations about taking on the most celebrated coaching jobs in the first place. And once we're in the deep end, maybe how you start molding and shaping with a view to play on sport's biggest stage. Welcome, Tim Walsh, all the way from Australia. How are things down under?
Yeah, they're pretty good. Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks for having us.
And then the man who wrote the acclaimed Sevens Heaven, but is more famous for his coaching exploits, Ben Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us. You're in London, right?
Yeah, I'm in London. It's a beautiful evening here, Elma, so it's great to be here.
And specializing in puzzles, I see on Instagram. I've been doing my stalking. In this three-part series, we'll hear, as I said, from athletes Emma Tonegato, the Aussie who dropped league and touch footy for sevens and a shot at goal. She'll be joining us. Fiji team manager Rob Carvesi and Fiji's gold medal winning captain Osea Kolonisau is also going to be joining us in this episode. Before we get going, let's maybe remind ourselves of some of the sights and sounds of Rio early in August 2016. Can you believe it's been 4 years? As I say, can you believe it's been 4 years? But we're actually going to start by winding the clock even further back to 2009, a year that saw the world introduced to Lady Gaga. Barack Obama became president of the USA. At that stage, South Africa was, yes, reigning Rugby World Cup champions as well as Sevens World Series champions. But Wales and Australia won Rugby World Cup Sevens that year. And another really important thing that happened in the Sevens universe in 2009 was, of course, the fact that it is the format of rugby that was chosen that year in Copenhagen to signal the return of rugby to the Olympics for the first time since 1924.
Valid ballots 89, majority 45, yes 81, no 8. Rugby Sevens is accepted as an Olympic sport.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's great for sevens rugby in general, but not just for men's, but for women's as well. You know, this is just going to take it to a different level in terms of you know, where it's going to reach and everything else. And we've always wanted to, you know, in rugby itself, to get it onto the biggest stage, and can't get any bigger than the Olympic Games.
Rugby brasileiro espera vocês nas Olimpíadas de 2016. Uhul!
I remember actually Scott Bowen and Tim Walsh came and watched me play a game of rugby league down in Wollongong. So it was about a 2-hour drive, and it was not of the best quality. And I remember them coming down, and I was like, oh, wow, like this is serious. They really want me. And we kind of talked about it, and you know, they were saying that there was a big push to make the program centralised before the Olympics, and a 4-year goal of winning gold, and that they wanted me to be a part of that. So yeah, that was kind of my first memory, I think, of Walshy, and how I kind of got all involved in that. From there, I made my debut in Dubai. It was in 2013, and then we went full-time in 2014.
Australia, champions in Dubai, and how they have enjoyed it.
From my first debut, you know, it was drilled into us, we're going to win the Olympic gold. So, yeah, kind of knew from the start that that was going to be our destiny, I think.
I never dreamt of going to an Olympic. I've always said that my dream was always go to a Sevens Rugby World Cup, because I watched the '97 World Cup as a schoolboy, and I saw Fiji doing Manasambari, you know, running down the tram lines, and they did the highlights of it after the World Cup final, and you know, you hear the song in Union going, and he's running, and that song was like, man, I hope one day I can do that, you know, play in a World Cup. So I missed out on 2 World Cups. One was through injury, and one was a non-traveling reserve in Russia. But my dream was always to go to a World Cup, and the opportunity of going to the Olympic presented itself. You know, I changed my goal, changed my dreams, and I was like, you know, I always thought about it and what it'd be like to go to an Olympic. And I've always told the boys, imagine if we won the Olympic, if we won gold in the Olympic. You know, I was like, we'd be Hall of Famers in Fiji. You know, it's like there's other opportunities that, you know, that can happen. So my goal was always trying to go to the Olympic to win.
I do recall October 2009 when the announcement came through that the rugby will be part of the Olympics for 2016. There was quite a big excitement in Fiji, because by now Fiji, the whole of Fiji was up knowing that there's a chance of a first medal coming into the country.
And back then Fiji Sevens wasn't doing really well in the series. Now it was like inconsistency happening.
Wow, that's so cool to see their faces. Ben, you were smiling while watching that. And would 2009 Ben Ryan have believed it if someone went back in time and told him, you are going to take these guys all the way to Olympic gold?
No chance at all. Back then I remember I was in a TV studio coaching England Sevens when we got the vote for the Olympics, and I was, you know, my mind was set towards hopefully coaching Great Britain in those first Olympics in Rio. It's so cool to see Osei and Rapati, you know, they were so central to everything we did, and yeah, it brings shivers back to me. It's very cool.
Tim, you were, of course, still playing in 2009, still with the Sevens?
Yeah, I had my last tournament was in 2009, and then I went over to Italy for a couple of years. And coaching wasn't really on my radar at all. And the under-20s Australian team was over in Padova in Italy where I was playing. And I ended up working for them as the analyst. And then Dave Nucifora sort of hooked me into a room and said, mate, do you want to coach the women's team? Which I denied and pretty much giggled at, like, I'm not going to coach a women's rugby team. And a year later, he asked me again, you know, would you come back and be a coaching coordinator for both the men's and women's sevens team? Which for me, it was a good idea. I had enough of being in the piazza and drinking my prosecco and wanted to get back to Australia. And I took the job, and sort of a year later, I was head coach of the women, and I felt quite humbled and quite naive about my first impressions or my first answers to David. And you know, what's since happened from then, watching this great game progress and the people that I've met along the way, my whole perception's changed of women's rugby, but then the power of the game and the Olympics to catapult, you know, sevens, as Jonah said there, into a whole new dimension of rugby on the international stage.
I've heard you say that before, talking about the fact that initially you weren't very impressed with the idea of coaching women's rugby, and then having a big change of heart and feeling a bit sheepish about that. Was there an aha moment? Was there something specific that happened? Did someone say something? When did that change occur? What can it be attributed to?
Yeah, I think I'm embarrassed by my first sort of reaction to it, but it's the people you end up working with. And you know, you take Emma there, for example. Like Scott and I were driving 2 hours on a Sunday to watch a Division 2 rugby league game, but then you actually get involved and meet the people, the staff, the players, and you can see what their drive, what their passion is, and the vision to be able to sort of change perceptions and enjoy an incredible game that's so diverse. So moments like that, you know, shared with Emma. But as each day progressed, just the talent, the opportunity, and the drive that these athletes had to build something special and to change, you know, rugby.
What's interesting to me about your timeline, Ben, is the fact that you left the RFU in 2013, full well knowing that the Olympics are on the horizon, and that if you were then, you know, still planning on coaching a team to the Olympics, you would probably have to make a move quite quickly. There was quite a shake-up. You know, of the top 6 teams at the HSBC Sevens World Series that year, I think only one retained their coach. Why do you think there was such a big, it almost feels like musical chairs that went down almost exactly 3 years out from the Olympic Games? Was it because of the Olympics?
No, I'm not sure it was. I think there was all sorts of things going on in those years beforehand, and I think some of us had been around for a while. So I'm thinking about myself and maybe Paul True. You know, we had gone head to head for a long time, and he had done some amazing things for South Africa, and then had gone across into the Kenyans for a little bit. For me, it was very different. I had fallen out of love with the game. I didn't want to be involved anymore, and even though I was desperate really to go to the Olympic Games with a team, when I got to the World Cup final in Moscow in my last tournament with England, and we got to the final for the first time in 20 years, I didn't really want to be there. I'd had enough of professional sport really, and it was only through like a mate tweeting me saying, have you seen that Fiji are looking for a new head coach, that I kind of began to just pull that thread. And that's what took me across to start those 3 years towards the Olympic program to Fiji. So yeah, a whole load of things kind of like happened to conspire to allow me to have that opportunity to work with the Fijians.
And then, Tim, of course, the road to the Olympics isn't exactly a straight one. For some teams, you qualify by participating in the HSBC World Series, and other play a variety of other events. And so there's, you know, there are stages at which the participants are confirmed. The 12 teams that end up going is kind of revealed over the space of a few months. Tell me about how Australia qualified.
Yeah, so to finish in the top 4 of the qualifying year, you automatically go in as a qualified team. So we were well positioned the year before, where we finished second. So that was obviously our objective, was to get there and not have to go through the repechage or through the Oceania competition. And yeah, we played pretty well that season, but it certainly was a defining moment for us as a team. We had that really successful first season and finished second and won a couple of tournaments. And then in the following year, which we sort of coined for our team, growth and establishment, or growth and leadership, sorry. And we went second, fifth, seventh, and we were sort of sliding down the table. And we had a tournament in London, and we played the final at Twickenham in a packed house. But we were sliding down, and that moment, basically, we came back from, I think it was Canada, and we had the girls training almost the day we got back, which was something I probably have to learn. But it was a really tough sort of time mentally and physically. But we went into London following exactly what we were going to do. We didn't sort of change our tact and try something else. And we went into London and played probably the best rugby we'd played up until that point. And we beat New Zealand in the semi, and then we beat Canada in the final. And it just sort of shifted our mindset and gave us a real confidence boost on what we were doing and how we were going to achieve it. So the result of that pretty much put us into the Olympics. I think all we had to do was get to the quarter final in Amsterdam, but we went on to just lose the final in that one. But yeah, that ended up, I think we finished second or third, which was automatic qualification for the Olympics, which was nice and all part of the process. But it was just another step to 2016.
Let's take a look at some of the footage from exactly how these two teams qualified for the Rio Olympic Games.
For the first year, the preparation to get qualified in the second year, there was a lot of work done in the particular first year, especially in the second half of the series in that first year, making sure that the players that we have that capability to achieve that target, not only personally, but as a team as a whole. So as when we got into the second year, we target tournaments as we build up towards that to qualify for the Olympics. And I believe we qualified when we played in Glasgow.
We've made it into the Olympics. It's been a long road. There's plenty top teams in the series. We've worked hard towards it. The boys were really proud about making it to Rio, and it probably means a lot to Fiji as a whole, because it's the first time that a team of athletes will go to an Olympic with a contenders to win a medal. It's a dream come true.
When Ben came in, he brought a lot of structure, and the way Ben is, like, people ask me, like, how is Ben as a person, smart for a person, and the way he puts ideas into your head, like, you guys gonna go to the Olympic, like, this is a big one, he's always telling the boys, like, because most of the boys are like just another tournament, and Ben puts it into perspective. It's like, this is the pinnacle of sports.
It's been a long time coming. Obviously, a lot of preparations going into it. Obviously, missing Scotty here is a bit sad, but we know he's back in Australia, and he's probably pretty proud of us. But the job's not done yet. We're here for the tournament and to get into the finals.
All I know is, from a player's perspective, we went out and tried to win every single game that we could. So yeah, I'm not too sure how it all played out. I can't really remember, it's so long ago, but yeah, no doubt there was a grand plan from Scotty and Walshy, but yeah, we just went out and tried to win everything, and we knew what we had to do by, so yeah, we tried to do that, but again, tried to just win as much as we could.
Ben, I love how in your book Sevens Heaven you write about how in order to change Fiji, you had to let Fiji change you a bit. And Rupate mentions that first and second year in charge and building enough consistency in order to secure qualification in the top four. Talk to me about what had to change, both on your side, but also on the Fiji team side, in order to achieve qualification.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I guess that, like, the one thing that I inherited when I went across to Fiji was talent. They had talent. They didn't have any money. The union had gone bankrupt. There was no resource outside the players, and they weren't given appropriate feedback. They weren't given the intensity of training. They weren't told how they could improve. There was no real pathway into the team. So I had to put some foundations in, as well as put some non-negotiables, put my black and white around the team, the guardrails that for me was, the fitness and the discipline and the timings that the team agreed, so that they could just do their thing inside those guardrails. And I just, simple really equation. If I got them really fit, then they would stay able on the field for longer to be able to do the thing that they just did naturally. And it was a little things like that at the very start. You know, in the first couple of tournaments, my defensive pattern was just keep 7 players on the field, don't get a yellow card or a red card, and that was where we started. And you kind of build things from there. And then from me, look, I'm a big believer that if you get everybody to be their best version, then you can get a program that can soar. And whenever you start to read about or see a program or a team that's not doing as well as they can, it's never because someone's not turned the GPS on their shirt, or because they've not hit their speed targets or their fitness levels. It's because relationships are broken down within the team or with the coach. And so I know that if I get that right, I get to understand the player, understand what their why is, why they do what they do, so that they understand that I believe in them and I want them to be their best version. And Ropati and Osea really helped me in that respect. Then we'd be on our way to starting to get a program together that could achieve some decent things.
It's really interesting. Tim, this reminds me of a piece that you wrote about being coached by Ben. You're smiling. You look so knowingly when he talks about relationships.
No, I think that there's no secret to it. It's just how you execute it is the hardest thing. And it's exactly the same for us within the women's team. Is that once you had that identity around understanding each other, being comfortable in your own skin, then you get to behave the way that you want to. You feel great, and you enjoy working. You enjoy the hard work, and then when you've got the right strategy or the right vision, which Ben and I seem to have at that time. And yeah, I did coach Ben. I actually taught Ben how to play sevens when he was coaching me.
Yeah, I don't know. So you know this, Elma, right? So I coached Tim back when he came across into the UK. But yeah, no, he was. You actually probably did teach me a little bit about sevens when I was coaching 15s too. I remember when Ben got the job for England, and we were quite disappointed because we were going to lose him as our coach. But he took me out to lunch in Oxford, and he sat me down and goes, "Mate, you got to tell me everything you know about sevens, because I've got the job." I'm claiming it. Yeah, that was a really short lunch.
Well, look at us now.
I'm seeing a pattern here, though, Ben. Taking a job and saying, "Oh, hi, one of my players, please help me." And the Fiji job, you also seem to have just taken on, and then went, "Oh wait, we didn't talk about things like salary and whether this union can even afford to have a coach employed at all."
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I remember when I was a teacher, I went from a state school, a comprehensive in London, to a big boarding school in Oxford before I started coaching Tim. And Richard Branson was one of the parents, because I was teaching his son and his daughter. And we would talk about stuff. And he said, like, if there's ever a job, that you really want, but you don't think you're qualified for, just say you can do it, and you'll work it out in between. And I kind of lived by that mantra, and it's done me all right so far.
It's really cool to hear that. I do find the older I get and the more people I speak to, the more I realize a lot of people are busking their way through it and figuring it out as they go, and fiddling with little bits. And as you also write so beautifully about finding the little things that you can fix that then gives you the momentum that turns into getting the rest of the thing rolling in the direction you want it to. And that's what's interesting to me about the track record that you guys built, because as you say, initially the defensive pattern was just to keep enough players on the field to remain competitive consistently. And in terms of your results heading into the Olympic Games, was all of the preparation going exactly the way that you wanted it to?
Yeah, so look, in the first of the 3 years, my first year there, I was understanding as much as I could about Fijian culture, building the foundations, and we did pretty well. We won a couple of tournaments. I think we hit the majority of semi-finals, and we came third. And then the following year, it was then about qualification for the Olympics, qualifying as #1 seeds, and we won the World Series. And then it was okay, if we're going to go into the Olympics, already qualified, but we have a 1 year of the World Series. we want to back that up with form. You know, of course you can go into Olympic Games or a big event and win without having form, but it gives you confidence that you're really competent. And we knew that winning that last series, even though I had kind of overfed them a little bit, as far as I wasn't as harsh on their nutrition in the first half of that final season. I wanted to protect them a bit from injury. I wanted to win the 3-day tournaments that the Olympics was going to be, to give us confidence that the stuff we were going to do in the Rio also had validity and had success. And then it was just about then going in post HSBC World Sevens Series in that really cool window we had before the Olympics, to then put all the little icing on the cake, that, you know, the Fijian tech pack on top of everything, so that we could get to the Olympics absolutely hitting it as hard and as perfectly as we could.
Tim, what's interesting for me in comparing the journeys of these two gold medal winning teams is that the challenges that Ben's team faced are pretty patently obvious. You know, from players pitching up at training, having not eaten for 24 hours, coming from the most rural of backgrounds, working with real structural constraints, to what seems like the opposite end of the spectrum with the setup you guys had going in Australia. What were the biggest challenges for you in preparing your team to run into the Olympics with the kind of momentum that you guys clearly had built?
Yeah, so there are some similarities and obviously some massive differences. But, you know, when we ignited the dream or started, we had a vision on how we were going to win the Olympics. And that sort of came from a real diverse group of athletes. Like, we wanted to, you know, speed and skill and vision. So we actually had this talent ID day around the country to select players that we thought were going to fit this vision. So we didn't just take current rugby players and plug them into being sevens players. So we took a different tack to what was probably the rest of the world was doing. So that obviously has massive challenges, is to trying to get all these players on the same page and understand the game. So initially very young, very naive, as we sort of spoke about, and we'd go to training, and I couldn't plan or have a session that I was probably used to, because we had girls with this skill, didn't even know the rules, couldn't kick. So we had to like break everything down into really small groups to get everyone up to a level of being competent on the game. So that initially massive challenge. And then as they get to a point, the game sort of picked up a little bit, and then we went full time. So it was moving, you know, 18-year-olds, 30-year-olds who were full-time work, making a choice to have a run at the Olympics and then go professional. But no one had even contemplated being a professional rugby player. So they're all moving to Sydney, on some of them taking massive like salary cuts from their job, and now we're a professional rugby team. So how are we going to behave? How are we going to look? And that poses challenges, but also a massive opportunity to be something different, to be something that we could develop. We had a complete sort of blank canvas, but challenges within that. And as sort of Ben said there, and these are the similarities, we had a lot of like themes for our season, and then under those themes were all different things we wanted to achieve, and then it all sort of puzzled up together to culminate in Rio. So were there ups and downs? There were plenty, but overall, each year they seemed to be sticking. Like, we had Ignite the Dream, you know, go around the country and select players, and then it was foundations, or, you know, building the platform and the establishment of this team. And then the next year, which was the qualifying year, was growth and leadership. Like, how are we going to grow as a team? Our leaders within the team had to take it to the next level, and we wanted to lead the way the game was played. So, you know, creating the trends. And that was, you know, each year I can look back and look at really massive defining moments that actually sort of related to those themes and got us to the next step. And then the final year was dominance and destiny, which was the Olympics. And Emma sort of alluded to it before, around we just had this belief and trust that we were going to get there. And it was never about gold. It was about performing, and then the outcome being the gold. And we knew we were that good that if we performed, we were the better team. So it's how are we going to perform in that moment, and dealing with the pressure, but moving the whole team, developing ourselves as players, as a team, what we wanted to be for Australian rugby, and then all the emotional baggage around that. You know, making these massive choices to be Olympians and come together. And within that, there's plenty of tough decisions and tough choices that clearly they all made and bought into.
Yeah, so Emma's from Rugby League. That's where she came over from. Where did you go look for players? Because that's often the challenge with women's rugby, is that you have to convert athletes who had come through the age group competitions playing other sports, excelling in other areas. As a sevens coach, if you had to sit down and go, okay, let's go find ourselves some athletes, where do you go, Tim?
Yeah, so, I mean, to be a sevens player, you sort of need to be a jack of all trades. Like, you need to be able to do all these different jobs, but you have to be a master of some. And so you break the game down. What are the really important areas? You know, it's the restart. So you need accurate kicker, good aerial skills. There's only 7 on the field, so the speed, the space you have, the ability to pass left and right 15 metres, or the ability to be able to do that, the potential to be able to do that, and then obviously defence and all the winning attributes that you have. So there's a lot to consider, but if you want a balanced team, you sort of got to break it down. So we went to the track. Ellia Green sort of got her and went to basketball with Chloe Dolan, her aerial skills, but she ended up being one of the world's best kickers. Touch players was probably our biggest one, because that was the vision of how we thought we would win, was have these amazing skilled players that could look up and create space and see mismatches. So that was our biggest one. So we had basketball, track, soccer, touch football, rugby league being Emma, and rugby union. Shani and Shano were multifaceted athletes, but their major game was rugby. So had the vision of, this is how it's going to look and this is how we think we're going to win it, so we need to pull those athletes in. And igniting the dream, or trying to get them in, was the 2012-13, where we did the TID day. And that was a magnificent sort of strategy from Dave Nucifora and Anthony Eddy. So they developed this idea, and we went around Australia basically marketing an opportunity for the Olympics. We put them through a battery of different tests, and then we had a group of us sort of selecting out which players could go to the next level, and then to the next level, and to the next level. So it ended up being about 800 sort of athletes, and then out of those 800, I think 4 of them went on to play for Australia, and 1 of them went on to be Olympic gold medalist, and that one being Ellia Green. And there's some incredible footage of her playing in those days. But like, to go through that, and then you find an Ellia Green, it was incredible. Like, you always hear, like, 1 in a million. Ellia is 1 in a billion. She's one of the most incredible people that you'll meet, but then to see her progress and become a gold medalist is, I think, one of those special moments as a coach that you sort of will treasure. And as we have discussed it before, money can't buy that kind of stuff. It's something you do because you love it, and then you just start working for the people, and it's you just keep on going, and when you're in that environment that you create, it's fun.
I just was picking up on Ellia, the fact that 800 athletes, and then she came through and got a gold medal. How long did it take her to get up to scratch? So you knew she was going to be good enough to play sevens in the World Series.
Well, there's a video clip we've got of her scoring the try in this TID day, and over the mics, everyone was like, "There's our Olympic gold."
Yeah. Okay. All right. So pretty quick.
Yeah, but along the way, I say she's a fascinating person and very intelligent. But then other times I'm thinking, is she all there? And at training, like, you would have taken her. Yeah, she gets better and better. But her point of difference was so impressive that you couldn't leave her out. But she was dropped for a period of time, and then she sort of came back, and she's finding herself. And, like, as you're aware, to become a world-class athlete, it can take, minimum sort of the 10,000 hours. But Elia had all these attributes, and one of them was she loved to entertain. So there's no better place to entertain than on the biggest sporting stage in the world. So she was probably never not going to be picked. But yeah, she got better slowly each year, and she still does.
Anyone who's ever watched the Fijian Sevens team play would probably be forgiven for thinking that Fiji is filled with Elia Greens, because the obsession with rugby, and particularly with Sevens rugby, runs so deep there. Do you just get off the plane, Ben, and then there's a queue of hundreds of young Fijians who want to come play for you? Or did you have to also unearth some talent in the process?
Yeah, it's a whole combination. I mean, I remember my first week in Fiji where the team had been selected for the Gold Coast by 8 selectors. I had no say in it. And I watched them play in the Oceania, and then alongside the Oceania tournament was a Fiji Water International Sevens, where the US, Argentina, a couple of other France had gone as well. And I watched, I think it was Argentina, play against the Hilton Hotel team, and they put 40 points on them. And I was like, okay, we got some talent on this country, really. If a hotel staff had just put 40 points on a very good international sevens team. And then when I went round to the villages and I saw what was going on in all the small tournaments, and there would be multiple tournaments every week. You'd just look in the papers, and I'd see where the tournaments were, and you knew where the better teams were going, because you just looked immediately at the prize money. And the bigger the prize money, that's where the big teams went. Smaller the prize money, that's where the smaller teams would have a little crack. And you went around, you had a look, and you saw the same good and the same bad. So you saw the ability to just play in the present, throw the offload, worry about it, tomorrow, and play with this amazing thrill. But then you also saw tackles up here, because you're trying to get the ball, because back in the villages, they just play a one-touch, a one-tackle game. So you want to try and disrupt the ball. And they all also play in the village with a really an old ball, or a T-shirt scratched up, or a sand-filled Coca-Cola bottle. And so their small passing is amazing, but the long passing just doesn't happen because they never get a chance to try that. And then there's chaos everywhere, because it's normally an uneven bit of patch of land in the village where there'll be, no one's wearing, a set of jerseys playing against each other. They're in different colours. There's lots of people. It's all ages, from your uncle and your dad to your sister and your brother. And they're playing one touch. So it's chaos. So their ability to be able to understand, see what's available, opportunity, communication, non-verbal stuff is amazing. So it's getting all that together, and then getting them disciplined, getting the training right, putting all the other stuff in play. And like Fijians, they're never going to be practicing breakdowns on the beaches. So we didn't want breakdowns, but if we were going to have a ruck, we had to make sure that it was a really good one. And, the team would never practice lineouts or scrums. They'd do it on a Friday afternoon before the tournament, and they would never analyse the opposition. So when I was coaching England, I knew that if I just shifted my kickoff to the other side, there'd be no Fijians there to receive the ball, and you could do things at line out and scrum and penalty to disrupt them. So it was putting all those things in place, as well as the talent that already existed.
Let's take a look at the selection process and the final preparations before Rio 2016.
To announce the team, everyone was in the car park like, oh my God, are you going? And that was really exciting. But some girls were in tears because they didn't get selected. So that was a little bit hard.
I think I was a bit unsettled, the boys coming in. But at the end of the day, and I'm saying, like, we want the big picture. And Ben was always saying, you want the best players available to take to Rio and to the Olympics. We want the best players and the best talent available. And Ben was always transparent with the players, and he's like, I'm always gonna pick on form and fitness. And he always say, like, when we come into camp, it's best of the best. There's not only average players, these are some of the best players in world rugby that are coming in, and they might take my position in the team. And it was quite unsettling, but I was like, it was quite a challenge to, I was like looking forward, like, oh, I want to train with them and I want to play with them and see, test myself out.
Tim made sure we had a plan for everything, and we'd feel comfortable with no matter what happened. We'd prepared for the rain, we'd prepared for the wind, for the sun, full crowd, quiet crowd, getting yelled at, like every single thing you could think of. Walsh, had prepared and thought of it first and foremost, and then prepared and then kind of instilled in us that, how to overcome any issue.
People outside don't really understand that the standard Ben set for the boys was just at a different level. And he maintained that standard for the 4 years he was with us. And he said, we are not going to change for anyone. So we had an 8-week cycle on that last build-up. That was the toughest sevens I've played in my life.
The boys at the sand dunes, they gave their all right there and then, because each one was fighting for that position to get on that plane. Each one wanted that airline ticket. Each one wanted to stand on that podium. And by 5:30, we're at the top of the dunes, ready to go. Still early morning with cloud hanging over our head before the sun breaks it up. And the boys are running up and down the dunes. It burns on the legs, the calf, the thigh muscles. And the worst one is, trying to suck in that air so that you can pump your legs to get up that sand mound to get to the top.
When you have 20 players, 20 of the best sevens players in a camp, and everybody's fighting for that 12th position. And I've always said the dunes, no matter how fit you are, it's like it kills you. It was just a tough cycle, 8-week cycle, but I'm happy that we did that because it helped us a lot in Rio. Ben made us play sevens. We played 6 games a day, sevens, in a day, and it's just full on sevens. It's non-stop. He gets a world-class referee in, and he just sits on. There's a tower he built, and he sits there with his camera, and he just pre-selects the team. Like, okay, Black, this is you, and you guys just decide who comes in for substitution, and the game just keeps on going. 7 minutes break. Okay, let's go again.
Before we went to the Olympics, it was a pretty hectic week. I remember we had a family barbecue at home, and my family made me put on my Olympic uniform and paraded around and took heaps of photos. I lived with Alicia Quirk and Emily Cherry at the time. We were all packing, like, what are you packing? What are you packing? We were sharing bags and, trying on every single piece of clothing that we could, because we had the kit that you get is just insane. Like, we had dresses and, writing in the group text, what are we wearing to the airport? Which item, which jumper is that? Because there's 800 that we get. And then, getting to the airport and seeing everybody else in their uniform was kind of a pretty, like a moment that was so surreal. And we were like, oh my God, we're actually going today. So, yeah, that was kind of the lead up.
Oh, it's so special seeing Emma talking about that. I want to go back to something Isaiah mentions about the European boys and Jared Hayne coming in, and that being unsettling. How do you manage that, Ben, when you're the coach in charge?
So I want to create an environment where the boys feel safe to have discussions, to be their best version. But I love vibrating players. I want to cause a bit of vibration in the squad so that they have to. They have to be at their best. So when Jared came in, when Waise and Asai Levu, who was top try scorer at the time in the top 14 in France, came in, Leonie Nakarawa, those guys came in from overseas, and Josh Tuisova. Like, it road tests 2 things. It road tests like your program, that you're not going to treat someone differently because they're superstars coming in. And, in Jared Haynes' case, he was a millionaire rugby league player coming into our program, and I was giving him his shirt on a Monday morning and saying, hey, look, this is your shirt for the week. Keep it clean. Here's a bar of soap. And he had to deal with that. I wasn't going to give him a different set of rules to the rest of the boys. And then also it's like, as Osea said, I was constant throughout. I pick on form and on fitness, and if you're good enough, then you're going to get in. And if, on the flip side, the kid that gets in front of Jared Hayne has got a big spring in his step when he makes the team in front of a world-class player like Jared. So there were lots of good reasons why we wanted to vibrate that team in those 8 weeks. And And we did full on, like Osea said, we did full on World Series tournaments, 6 games, 5 games, 3 tournaments in 3 days before we went to Rio, where all the boys went head to head against each other. And by the end of it, you know, everybody had had a fair crack, and we all knew the squad that we were going to select for Rio.
And Osea mentions that Tuisova would waking up at 4 to go running with him because he wanted to fit in with the boys and get fit.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You know, you set a culture out where you've got architects, and Tim's the same with the group he had. You've got cultural architects within that team, where as a coach you're becoming less and less important, effectively. You know, to the point where I make myself redundant probably in the Olympic final. I probably didn't need to be there because Osea and the rest of the team are running themselves. So they set their standards within that group, and yeah, boys were getting up and doing extras. They were, you know, when I took them off sugar, that was a nightmare, Elma. You know, I had to have all sorts of people on quick phone calls if they were breaking their sugar bans. You know, the petrol station was the closest place to get any chocolate or crisps, and those boys were all on bonuses. I'd give them a rugby ball if any of the boys had come into the petrol station. And it was all about getting those standards right. And yeah, so Oscar probably summed it up well. It was the best rugby I've ever seen was in those training camps before the Olympics. It was the hardest stuff I've ever seen as well. And it kind of made the Olympics not easy, but certainly you go into a tournament with a lot of confidence, knowing the groundwork and the planning you'd put in underneath that.
Another thing Osea said was that people in the villages were spying on them and keeping them accountable to ensure that they didn't transgress, they didn't break any of the laws. That's the one thing about a small community like Fiji, I guess, that you can rely on. Everyone wants you to win. Everyone has bought in on this dream. Yeah,
like you use what you've got available. So if I think the boys need a bit of a kick to get a little bit fitter or eat a little bit better, I told the newspapers and I told the people, look, the boys need to get fitter, keep an eye on them, you know, and they did, and they would push it pretty hard. I mean, I even had a Friday night rugby show where I was teaching line out lifting and kickoff technique. This was like, you know, Friday night, you know, where everybody back at home would be doing all sorts of different things, not learning line out technique. But it's the Fijian way, and the coconut wireless is a great way to keep on tap of all the boys and make sure they're behaving themselves. So yeah, I had spies everywhere, and it helped me immeasurably.
Tips for coaching in small communities like an island nation. There you go. The mind of a champion. Tim, I do remember though, days before the South African team jetted off to Brazil, speaking to Neil Powell for an interview, and him being incredibly upset at how painful the selection process was, leaving players out, communicating that to them. After you've spent so much time encouraging and building, motivating, then to make that harsh final call. Tell me how you went about it.
Yeah, look, I always made a big deal about selections because it's always such an honour to play for your country, and you know, you could always weave in a theme that we're trying to do for that tournament. So, you know, I remember one time I was giving them all a piece of a puzzle, and they all tried to figure out what it was. And when they figured it all out and put it all together, they realised that was the theme for that tournament. You know, and then they'd take that into the tournament. So every time there was a team named, we would do something that was creative and special and resonated with what we were working on in that period. But yeah, look, the naming or selecting a team is it's the highs and lows, because you get these amazing moments of telling people that they've selected to play for Australia, and that's the job that they have to do. It's their responsibility that they're going to play for Australia and go to the Olympics. And then there's the other side of the coin where you're telling them that they're not. And for some of them, it's been a 3 or 4 year journey. So we've always had this team culture, team identity that, you know, there might be, it's the 7 on the field, that their responsibility for the moment is to make sure that this program is being represented well, and then 12, and then obviously the whole squad. But obviously it doesn't feel like that when you're told that you're not being picked. So from my point of view, throughout that season, as Ben mentioned, there were sort of periods of where we were peaking and sort of taking not the foot off the pedal, but having sort of downtime, so we're peaking at the right time. And unlike the men at that stage, we didn't have 10 tournaments; we had 5. So and I think Emma Tonegata said it. You know, what's the point of going out there to play if you weren't going to win? And we wanted to go in as number 1 for various different reasons: confidence, the draw, all that kind of stuff. But the team more or less picked itself by form, by combinations, by cohesion, and there was a lot of internal competition. And the great thing about where the girls got to in that year was that, as Ben put it as well, that they were so competitive and so driven to perform and to win that I didn't have to redundant. I didn't have to crack the whip all the time. They had this growth and leadership stage where you had these certain players that had different roles in the team, and they were driving stuff. Like the Sugar story, they came up with this 100-day choice. And that actually took me off sugar, Ben, by the way. Sugar and coffee, that was what I was told not to do.
Sugar, baby, coffee, never.
Yeah, I said this is performance. Me drinking coffee is not good for performance. So but they initiated and drove, and then the selection piece. We started way back that we weren't going to the Olympics just to participate. We were going there to compete. And it was funny just watching that stuff of Emma. And I remember once we had to go for the fitting for the Olympic stuff, get the tracksuit kind of thing. And they were young girls, and they'd made the team. And I think Emma had an ankle injury, and she was sliding across the floor on socks, and they were spinning their bags around. And I was just like, they're not ready, they think they've made it. But they quickly switched, and they were in the mode that we were here to perform. And I think one of the proudest ones was when they walked into the Olympics, into the village, and there was the Usain Bolts and the Raffas all walking past, and they were just businesslike. They were ready, and they weren't going to be distracted, which was a light bulb or a moment that I won't forget. That I thought they're here to do a job and be focused. So I've gone off the question, but the team naming, I started to film them for about 4 years out, and in anticipation that we were going to select the team and then show them this motivational piece. So I had 4 years of different interviews and behind the scenes and training and all of our different themes and different training themes each year. And actually, on Ben's point, the first year was how quickly we could get off the ground. So they would have done 10,000, get-ups or pancakes. And the second year was that leg burn, so the hill runs and the prowlers, just being ultimately fitter than everyone. And then the third year was based on Fiji, was because we weren't the biggest team, we weren't the strongest. We had one really, really quick girl. It was about being the smartest team, and we called it Fiji Touch. So we would play Fiji Touch all the time, avoid contact, and Fiji Touch meant no rucks. So it was playing that way. So we had all the different phases within our program that led us up to that. And then the selection one is that I sort of gave them all a time to be somewhere. And for this time, it was in our headquarters, and I'd edited this 30-minute sort of documentary of our period. So we had some popcorn and a couple of drinks, and we showed this footage, and then each of them had a minute to themselves around their highlights and their journey to it. And that was how the squad was named, and their responsibility to the program and to Sevens was then to go onto the Olympics. But yeah, the toughest thing was to let girls know that, you know, they weren't selected, but always giving them something else to go to, you know, whether it be the Commonwealth Games or the next World Series, and that their contribution to the team and to this opportunity to go to the Olympics was because of what they've done as a program. Because, you know, as Ben said, you can create vibrations and different things, but you can't do it with 12 players. You need 20. You need staff. You need someone underneath. So, as best as you can, that's how you present it. But we've all been there as players, or, you know, business or whatever, where you haven't been picked, and it hurts, and so it should. But yeah, it's how you handle that, and that's the resilience. And I know that a lot of these girls that didn't get picked, you know, would be playing right now in Japan, or they're going to be there next year. So yeah, the highs and lows of coaching, but you have to do, you know, like if you have the identity or the vision which you have, you stick to that, and it's business in a way. And yeah, there's good moments with it, and there were some pretty amazing moments.
Of course, the one downside probably of having qualified already for the Olympic Games and then going into the 2015-16 season is that outside of that season trophy, I'm sure everyone's focus, at least with one eye, was on the Olympic Games. How do you guard against that? Ben, let's start with you.
Yeah, so yeah, we had qualified and we knew we were going into the Olympics as #1 seeds, but we were in a program that was massively competitive. That, you know, you can win a tournament for Fiji, but you know that your position might still be under threat because of the quality that we were producing underneath that. And we set ourselves some really clear goals in that year. It was to retain our World Series, to go in as #1 in the world, even though we were #1 seeds, but to go in on form effectively. I wanted to win the 3-day tournaments, so that was Hong Kong and Vegas were very important for us, and then to slightly undercook the players from a fitness point of view, so that I was training them pretty hard, but I was going a little bit easier on their nutrition. So I was kind of fattening them up a bit, Elma, really, so that they would be a bit protected from injuries, that we'd rotate players a lot more during that series, to allow everybody to have a crack. And kind of the curveball that we got was the cyclone that hit Fiji before the Vegas tournament. That was a disaster for the country, and we did no training going into that tournament. But it was massively unifying for the team, because we knew what was going on back home, and we lost our first game on the Friday night with about 6 players. Everyone was ill. We played terribly. They managed to kind of muster themselves without any help from me, with Osea win that tournament on really one arm and one leg, because they were knackered, ill, and wanted to go home. And we knew at that point that everything was pointing in the right direction. You know, that I knew that the team were very, very capable and robust and could deal with stuff that was going to get thrown at them. And so all of that was our kind of final 12 months, I guess, in the World Series.
Tim?
Yeah, the players, they were so competitive, and that was one of the reasons they were selected. And they did want to, no matter where it was, at training or on the field or at the Olympics, they just wanted to win, which was what sort of always made them so good. But we had unlike the men, we had 5 tournaments that year, but that was spread out over a long period of time. So we had different peaking points. And did we want to win the World Series? Yes. Did we want to go in as #1? Yes. Did we want to go and win the Olympics? Of course we did. So, but was there a strategy? Was there a plan? Yeah, we wanted to hit the first 3 tournaments, and Dubai being the first one, in really solid form, confidence, get that buzz and move up. And we did. We won the first three tournaments, and we talk about dominance and destiny. It was like, wow, this is really happening. And then we undercooked them. We dropped away a little bit, rotated a couple of players, and those players went out and performed really well as well, ended up coming 3rd in Canada. And then we sort of amped it back up again, and that's when the 100 days started. And then we had to look at different ways to prepare for the Olympics on the 3-day tournaments, and using Japan and New Zealand, and trying to get those specific sort of modelling or that scenarios in it to equal the Olympics. So we didn't have the ability really, because to cause vibrations by bringing in different players, we had to look other ways to do it. So we used to have just different curveballs to really unsettle the players, and a lot of that was revolved around dealing with the pressure and having, young women, majority of them, was balancing out with sort of the diversity in the older ones, like Gemma Etheridge and Nicole Beck, mother, and sort of having that maturity to really balance that team out. But yeah, to get them to have different scenarios, to be able to challenge them in a different way to make sure that they're on focus. And I remember I asked Charlotte Caslick whether she would get injured in the warm-up when we were having this 3-day tournament against Japan, and she said, "Yep, no worries." In the warm-up, she just before we were about to go in, she screamed and tears were coming out of her eyes, and she fooled me. I actually thought she was injured. I thought, what have I done here? I've like the law of attraction, or with Murphy's law, where you've said do this, and I honestly thought she was injured, and they took her off, and I think they even called the ambulance. I don't know. Anyway, and then after the game, she came, and pre that game, 6 of the other girls were, crying because we'd lost Charlotte, and it was her Olympics was over, and anyway, after the game, she came bouncing out with her ribbons and pigtails, and I was just I don't know. I set this up and you got me. I had no idea, but just the way that they could unsettle them that way to try and get them to focus, because like something like that could happen. So there was those different things to challenge them and get them into a point of mind where they can adapt and can handle pressure. The girls didn't like that one very much at all. They were furious. I think they're still a bit dirty on me for doing something like that. But yeah, it's but I can blame Charlotte for that anyway. She was the Academy Award winner. Yeah, but there's certainly performances and peaking and different strategies into it. And when you go to the Olympics, there's 12 teams, and if for Ben and I think it sort of is a bit of a evidence base that we both went in as favourites. We both went in as world's best, and we both came out with the gold medal. So there's something in that around form, and I think Ben probably remembers it as well. You talk to other coaches or read media articles, and it was like, oh, we're not worried about this season, we're just worried about the Olympics. But how can you get to the Olympics and expect to win when you haven't hit form and got your combinations and cohesion and confidence going into it? So it was very important for us to hit that in the best way we can. And we only knew how to go out there and play and win, otherwise there was no point. And then you look at the Olympics, there's 12 teams, and if you go in as number one and you win your pool, then you get the team that's ranked 8th. So that's pretty good odds. And then you win that game, you're playing for a medal. So going in that position was both your confidence building, but strategically puts you puts you in a better position, but different to the 16 kind of team tournament where you're doing the crossover, and you could end up with anyone anyway. But it was a nice way to be that you've got a softer quarterfinal, and you could peak for the right time over those 3 days.
Isaiah talks about that pre-Olympics camp, and he still looks a tiny bit scarred, Ben. He told a story that Nakarawa apparently said he would make you tire of blowing your whistle. Apparently you tried to break the big boys. Is that true? Yeah, that's all true. Yeah, and I didn't hide away from the fact that we were going to have very, very uncomfortable training sessions where
you forget potentially about workload, and you just work people to the point of mental and physical exhaustion. And then when they've all finished, then you get them doing more, and you play with them up there as much as everywhere else. And Leone Nakarawa, the human lamppost, he was one that I definitely got into because I think he'd probably tell you he needed to lose a little bit of weight going into the Olympic Games, and I had 8 weeks where I did my utmost to really help him in that. And the whistle did get blown a lot, but those 8 weeks were exhausting, but they were unbelievably rich of memory and fun. And there were weeks that I'm never going to probably ever replicate in my career, but I value them because you could see the progression of the team. You could see everyone getting fitter, better, more aligned, all the things that Tim and I yearn for as a coach. It was kind of happening in front of my eyes. And so seeing Leone slim down a little bit, that also ticked a few of my boxes.
Tell me about the selection and the tough conversations around that, and how the Fiji players took it.
Yeah, so look, for selection, we'd had these trials. So we'd played live games, full contact with referees, with open sessions. Public were coming and watching, and TV and media were talking about it all, and it was head-to-heads. And we finished all that, and then a day later, we had selection where we had a bure, so a thatched small house at the end of where we trained, where the boys would come in. I said 7 o'clock at night, come in when you're ready, when you want to have the conversation, and whether you're in or whether you're out. And I was there with Ropati and William, our physio, and Nadar, our conditioner, and Chris, the women's coach, and assistant coach for us, Chris Cracknell, and they all came in. Now I got dropped a lot as a player, so I've had it been delivered bad news really well, really badly. And I know that if you always give them direction on where they've got to get to, that by the time you have to deliver really bad news, they kind of know either way, whether they believe it or not. You've given them every opportunity, and you're not suddenly telling them something that they're just not seeing coming. But it's still difficult. Even Osea thought he wasn't sure if he was in or out. Now he was 100% in. He'd have got in before me. He'd have been coaching the team. But they came in, and then you just deliver the news, and you know that if you say you're in, or you say you're out, as Tim probably would understand, everything after that is white noise. So if you say you're this is the reason you're in, or this is the reason you're out, players aren't going to listen to that. They just want to know, are they in or are they out? So you pick up conversations with them afterwards around that. But I think because of the training, because of the matches, because of the opportunity they'd all had to go head to head against each other, nobody felt that they hadn't given it their best shot. And then, as Oscar said, it's 20 of the best sevens players in the world, and I can only fit 12 or 13 into going to Rio. And so we left 7 behind that probably all would have been good enough to get into a team, any of the other teams for the Olympics. So I was very lucky as a coach to have that wealth of talent.
You must have learnt that as you went along, Ben, because when you dropped me in 2008, it wasn't like that.
Oh man, what did I say? Surely I was nice to you, Tim. I'd got you all the way across from Australia. I wasn't going to say something. Plus, I probably never actually dropped you, did I? Did I ever drop you?
No, you didn't know.
No, there you go.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
on that selection stuff, I remember one of my most favourite ones was Gemma Etheridge, who I mentioned before. She's one of the older girls of the team, and she had such maturity and made such massive choices to be there. But she did her ACL sort of 3.5 months out, and it was pretty much sort of done. And we discussed different options. I said to her, Gemma, I don't, post this, are you going to keep playing? She's like, no, well, okay, let's have an attempt at this Lars sort of ACL operation. So we went for it, and as Gemma did, she'd been injured a few times before that, and she just worked so hard off the field. stay within the group, and she's seamlessly back into the team when she does return. She has such maturity, and that maturity was needed at the Olympics in such a young team, but such a different environment. So she was a really key part of my selection, and we worked really hard to get her to a stage, and then being able to deliver her the news that, Gemma, we've done it in terms of stage one. I've selected you. You've got yourself in a physical and mental state that's going to have a real impact on this team. And when I played her video of her sort of journey and her challenges and setbacks was incredible. And to see her sort of elation and how proud of herself and her family and everything was pretty special. And then to go on and win an Olympics for her, I think it's just an amazing story. But she didn't play; she didn't get on the field in the final. But her impact on the group was they all had massive impacts. But I don't think she really realises how important she was within that group and what she went through and how she represented herself. They were all good, but that was I think a really good story, and she's a great role model to anyone who gets injured, but has a goal.
Sacrifice, success, and significance. On the next installment of Mind of a Champion, we board the plane to Rio. Make sure that you don't miss it. Hit subscribe, follow World Rugby on all of your favorite social media platforms. We'll be back with more from Ben and Tim.